12 to 15 books.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you get a bit of diversity.
Yeah, Martin's
Very quite well connected, so he's assisted us in that process of being able to reach out to all the firms across
Yeah,
our
okay. Well, you get a bit of, as I say, you get a bit of diversity in size and reach of practice. Some of the just local firms, some of the national firms, some of the international firms, I suspect. You've got everyone.
Hopefully, that's kind of the idea of this, is to kind of get an understanding of each individual firm as they are, and then come together at the end with the presentations and kind of understand.
And then compare.
Yeah.
Compare what you've
and Martin has advised us to be quite critical.
Yeah, good.
In this process.
Yeah, good.
We're just working with Charlie at the moment, so I guess what we discuss is all we know to really go off. And yeah, hopefully these questions give us a better understanding.
Yeah. Okay.
How you guys operate. So yeah, first of all, thank you for taking time out to see us.
That's all right. You're welcome.
On this busy week.
And I might, and I don't know how long this will take, but I do actually have I think I said that to you before. I do have pretty much free up until about either 12 or 12:30. I'll just do a double check, just so that I know.
Yep.
So it's 12. So I'll have to be gone by about 12:45. That's fine.
That is fine. Yeah. Yeah, you said you looked over the list. We have added a few since then, just to kind of, if you had to keep you on your toes, just so you didn't know what to really expect.
That's right. Well, as I say, I didn't read it all that quickly anyway, so I'm on my toes anyway.
That's okay. And also, if there are any questions that you're not comfortable with answering, please that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, just say. Say it in your own words, what type of firm is Haim-Shirley?
Haim-Shirley is a national business. So we have offices currently in Perth, Adelaide, Sydney, Brisbane, Darwin. At some point during the course of this year, we'll be a truly national firm, and we'll reopen an office in Melbourne. We're a multidisciplinary practice. Haim-Shirley is a little different than most of the architectural firms around Australia, and probably internationally, in that the business has always understood the power of multidisciplinary connections or teams or collaboration internally. So Bill Haim started life as a planner, and then he did his architectural degree. And then he got together with David Charlie to form Haim-Shirley. So the firm, from its very beginning, started from an urban design type context and a planning context, and how architecture then fits with that. And it's gone on from there. So over a long period of time, we've always had unusual characters in the business that are from very different backgrounds. So I think we were the first of the architectural firms or multidisciplinary practices to have an economist inside the business. This was many, many years ago, in assisting us with working through or to ensure that what we're providing as commercial outcomes for our clients. So get all of that context right. So whether or not it's the urban design context, the town planning and the planning context, but also then the economics and how all that fits together with what we're actually building in the built form. So that's when you look back over the firm, you'll see all these different types of expertises or people with varied backgrounds that you might not normally expect in architectural practice, and that's been a common thread for the 40 years that Haim-Shirley's been in operation.
Okay. So a little bit about your background. How did you?
So I'm one of the different Bobs.
Yes.
So if you don't already know, I'm not an architect.
Yes.
So I'm a mechanical engineer initially, but my career has gone down a very different pathway over the last 10 odd years, in that I was heavily involved in the green building movement, then branched off to think more broadly about sustainability in built environment, then started thinking about cities and city planning and what that means for the delivery of built form. I ended up running a cooperative research centre. I don't know whether you guys know what cooperative research centres are, but they're basically collaborations between industry and universities to deliver research outcomes. So I was the interim CEO of a CRC bid called Designing Better Cities and Regional Centres. So that sort of put me more heavily in connection with the research faculties and the university faculties of the architecture department. So I was working for 7 architecture departments around Australia. So we had 7 universities all around Australia. Funnily enough, not one here in Adelaide. I had one in Western Australia, I had one in Queensland, 2 or 3 in Melbourne, one in regional New South Wales and one in Sydney. So it was an interesting process to go through, but one that, as I say, connected me more heavily with urban design and planning outcomes as well as architecture. So I continued to go down that pathway after we missed out on our CRC. Unfortunately, it was a $70 million bid. We got shortlisted. We thought that we would get selected, but we just missed out for a variety of reasons, mostly political. I then decided that it would be a good idea. What we were trying to do was a good idea. Basically, what we were saying was that the traditional model for delivery of built environment outcomes was broken. So there's a time and cost paradigm that exists in the way in which we deliver projects and deliver outcomes. And we were suggesting that was the wrong way to look at it. You really need to look at it from a value framework perspective and to look at what design really was instead of this project management, cost and time paradigm, which is basically an engineering project management linear process as opposed to design, which is the ability to be able to sit in ambiguity and navigate your way through the grey so that there's no linear process. It's a process of identifying the right problems to solve, and then as you solve that problem, you go and find the next problem, and then you actually keep your eye on the prize, which is the outcome you're trying to achieve. So that was the idea of the CRC. Now, obviously, as architects, you're taught that, but at some point in time, you potentially lose it because you come out into the real world, and the real world has this time and cost exercise. So I therefore, and being an engineer, I know how the differences between the creative thinkers in the design process goes and the way the engineering linear process goes. I understand it really, really well. So I thought that I might be able to add some value to that process in trying to connect the 2 pieces together and find a solution. So that was what the whole CRC thing was. So I then went off and said, this is such a good idea. I think I can do this as a private research institute. So I worked with 2 universities, University of Technology in Sydney and Curtin University in Western Australia, to try and create this research institute. Again, I didn't actually succeed, which is a shame. I do think that there's a real, and I still think there's a big need for this type of research to exist, to attempt to come up with new models for the delivery of built environment outcomes, ones that focus on the outcome as opposed to this getting stuck in this process that we currently get stuck in. So we didn't actually solve that problem, but I went and joined with Bagger, and I had the title of the Director of Urban Innovation. Again, it was the same idea, trying to promote design and the integrated design thinking, I guess, is really the issue. And the fact that if we focus very much on the outcome that we're trying to get to, and we bring as many different disparate disciplines together as possible, then potentially we have a way of finding and navigating our way through that process so that we tick all the value boxes, and whatever we deliver as an outcome has a commercial justification, as well as the sorts of other type of ethereal value judgments that we make on what the outcomes are. So that was, I guess, and then I left there and I worked for myself for a few years doing a number of different things, writing a book and odd things. But you can sort of see how that journey has led me to a business like Hame Charlie. It kind of makes sense when I tell the story like that, and I start off by telling you that Hame Charlie is this business that has traditionally recognised and understood how bringing in different thinking from other disciplines to create a commercial outcome is one that really works for it. So that's why, that's a good reason for why I'm here.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense, really, when you put it that way.
And there are other reasons as well. I mean, I believed for a long time that architects are not very good at running businesses, and engineers are pretty good at it. And given that I did run a pretty large engineering business, in fact the largest building services engineering firm in Australia, I figured that there might have been some additional value that I could add to the business by questioning, I guess, the way in which we did things and assisted how we might be able to make this a more efficient organisation from lots of different perspectives.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's not a money. It's not. But don't get me wrong in saying that it's all about money. It's not. So my whole process has been about people and getting the right culture and those sorts of things. I think everything else has been followed.
Yeah.
But you do have to have a few systems in place. You do have to understand the value of managing your business. You do have to understand all of those issues. Otherwise, you're not going to make any money and you might go broke. So that's just the way it is.
Okay. So moving down to more local, at the moment, how many staff do you have at this Adelaide team?
This office at the moment is, I'm going to keep saying unusual all the time. I probably should stop using that word. The total number of people we have in this office is probably somewhere around just under 35, might be about 32 or something like that. But it's made up of three components. This particular studio is made up of three components. We have the Adelaide office, which might be somewhere between 22 and 25 people, depending on what we do at any point in time, and might even be a few more than that. I then have the managing director of the firm sits here. So I have the managing director and his EA also here. So sometimes he's a part of my business. Sometimes he's part of the overarching part of the business. That makes sense, and I can explain Cadence a little bit more if you want to know. And then I have a group in here that are a national resource. They're called the BIM Bureau. So they are essentially a Revit drafting business within the business. So they do work for not only the studio, but most, it would be fair to say that the majority of the work that they do at the moment is for the Perth studio. Okay. And the reason for that is just the sheer size of the Perth studio. So I should actually explain that, the way in which that works. So the Perth studio represents probably a little bit more than 50% of the overall business of Home Charlie, maybe 55% of the overall business of Home Charlie. Home Charlie Perth is probably the largest architectural firm in Perth. If not, it's sort of in the top two. The next largest studio is this one, and then Sydney, and then Brisbane, and then Darwin. Darwin's really only 3 or 4 people. And then obviously our hope is that Melbourne will kickstart and keep going, and we can actually grow that. That obviously has its capacity or the capability to be much, much larger than any of the offices, really. Yeah. And so as the Sydney and Brisbane, I guess, from that perspective. So Sydney and Brisbane are newer studios, so they're still in the process of growing the brand and doing all of those sorts of things. I mean, Adelaide's obviously where the business started, so we've got history, we've got networks. It's Adelaide. We're kind of limited a little bit as to how big we can get here. I think the largest we've ever been in Adelaide is about 50. And there's obviously potential for us to get to that sort of level again, but we're never going to get any bigger than that. That's just the Adelaide marketplace. Perth, however, has been as high as 100 or more than 100 people in that office. And obviously the expectation is that our East Coast offices could easily exceed that if we get the right mix of people and projects and all those sorts of things happening over there.
Yeah, okay. So you touched on just shortly the key roles. Are there any key figures that house those kind of roles or those areas?
Talk about in this office, or we talk about nationally?
This office, just locally, yeah.
Because why don't I start nationally? Because then that makes more sense.
If you like, yeah.
So, and I don't know how much research you've done on Home Charlie before you got here. Did you have a look at the website and do stuff like that? Okay, so you'll know that the way in which the office runs, we have a number of portfolios. So we have a commercial and workplace portfolio, retail and town planning, defence, residential, tertiary education, science, research, etc. So we have all of these different sport and recreation, all these different portfolios. There is a leader for each of those portfolios that's nominated nationally for the business. Now, most of those leaders or most of those portfolios, the leadership happens to be in Perth, not surprisingly, given that that's far and away the largest office, 3 times the size of my office, which is the second biggest. So it's not surprising that Perth has the majority of the portfolio leaders in the business. That is something, though, that we recognise we need to change, given that we're somewhat constrained in relation to our growth potential, both in Adelaide and Perth. So there's not really a whole lot of point in having all the horsepower in those two businesses when all the growth can occur on the eastern coast, eastern states. So there is a need for us to think about how our business needs to be restructured going forward. But just for now, that's how it works. This office has one portfolio leader, one national portfolio leader, and that's in the defence portfolio. Now, what's particularly interesting about that is when you look at the amount of split between each of those businesses across the whole of the group. For example, nationally, our retail and town centre portfolio probably comprises about 40 to 45% of our total revenue. So Hame Charlie is, I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to say that we're probably in the top 2 retail architecture firms in the country. And, you know, if you talk to Kaylin, we're the number 1 retail architecture firm. That's what you can say, indeed, I guess. But there's an argument that would suggest that we are, in fact, the top retail architecture firm in the country. So therefore, it's not surprising that 45% of our total revenue is in retail. Retail is also an interesting portfolio in that although the portfolio leader lives in Perth, the ex-portfolio leader is in fact our Managing Director, Carlton Howard. So he obviously looks after the East Coast and looks after the Perth. So that's an interesting portfolio and it represents a big slice of the country, of the company. The Adelaide studio, our revenue is slightly different. Given that we've got the defence portfolio leader here in the office, it wouldn't surprise you that 30% of our entire revenue is defence in this office, whereas the rest of the business, it probably represents 10% overall. So we do the majority of the defence work here in this office. Not all of it, but we do the majority of it here in this office. We also do a hell of a lot of retail, which is not surprising given that we're where we are and as far as retail architecture is concerned. And that might represent another third or a quarter of the revenue that we generate in this office. This particular office also has some very significant residential work in Adelaide. So as you guys probably know, we're the architects for the Glenside redevelopment, which is the largest residential development in South Australia, 1,000 homes over the next 7 to 10 years. And we're also with the same developer out of Port Adelaide. And we're also doing the largest single residential development at Bowden. So we have quite a significant residential portfolio in this office. We also have and then the rest of it, we also have a pretty decent sport and recreation component of what we do. I mean, obviously Adelaide Oval's one of the projects that we were one of the 3 architects on.
You've got a good view, so you can just...
And we have a good view of it from here, that's right. So we were, I think, Cox, the main architects on that particular project, but Walton Brook and ourselves were a part of that consortium. So we've been able to, as a result of our work on Adelaide Oval, do a number of other sport and recreation type projects, whether it's gyms or smaller ovals for local councils and local footy teams and that sort of stuff, or whether it's pools. We've got quite a reasonable pool portfolio as well. We just finished Fleurieu Peninsula Aquatic Centre down at Victor Harbour in conjunction with DWP Suitors out of Melbourne. So that's a reasonable portfolio for us as well. Health, from time to time, comprises a significant amount of our workload here in South Australia. At the moment, it's quite small, but we're looking to sort of grow that. So I'm trying, as far as the structure, getting back to your question about the structure of the office, what I try to do is to at least get some specific expertise that relates to each one of those different portfolios. So, for example, in the commercial sector, although I'm not an architect, I have some very real expertise around commercial office and workplace and those sorts of issues, and so I wrote a book about that sort of stuff, as well as the green building issues. So that's really a commercial office space exercise. So that's sort of my bag. The urban design stuff, I've obviously got an urban design background, but I've just put on an urban design leader as well, who's very well known in South Australia. So we've got that bit covered. Retail, I've already talked about. There's quite a number of people playing in the retail space. We've got the defence portfolio leader. We're doing lots of residential projects. We're doing quite a number of sport and rec projects, and I've just put on an architect who has some very specific health planning and health architecture background experience. So as to sort of have the whole,
quite a broad.
All of the portfolios looked after, basically.
Okay, that covers that. What would a typical day be for you? Meetings, other site visits, anything like that?
For me personally,
yes.
All right. Well, I don't know whether there is a typical day. It'd be best to sort of talk about the sorts of things that I focus on during the course of any given day. The first one is resourcing. So that's about client management as well as deliverables on what it is that we've been contracted or commissioned to do. So I am often in conversations with our architects, most of the architects on a daily basis, but project leaders, to just see where they're at with their projects, to make sure that they've got the right level of resourcing, make sure that they're delivering what we've promised to our clients, and that could be across a range of different issues. And it obviously is completely dependent on where each of those projects are in their timeline. So it might be putting fees together for a submission to a client that we've spoken to. It might be going out and seeing them and getting the brief, and then returning them that scope with our fee offers. It might be thinking about how to resource a project from a concept design perspective or a design development exercise. Or it might be about making sure that we've got the right number of people to document whatever it is that we're supposed to be documenting, whatever it is that we're supposed to be delivering. So I'd reckon that every single day, that would be my number one priority, to make sure that we're delivering what it is that we're supposed to be delivering. And so you then have all of these other flow-on effects from that. The next thing that takes up my time, and all of these things run concurrently. They don't. It's a little bit like an integrated design process. None of this is linear. It's all sort of mixed together and integrated. The other one, of course, is, are we getting paid for what we're doing? So, do I have the right number of resources to deliver the project is one question. The second one is, am I getting the right amount of income to pay for the resources to deliver the project? And then if I am, then happy days. I can sort of think, all right, there's a profit that I can bank. I keep an eye on. If I don't, so in other words, if I have to put more resources on a project and the income coming in, then I have to have a think about, well, what do I do? Have we moved out of scope? Does that mean that there's a variation that I need to go and talk to the client about? Does it mean that I have to manage the client in some way because his expectations are beyond what it is that he's commissioned us to do? But basically, it's an attempt to match or to get it back to the point where we can get back into profit in those projects. So what I can't do is continuously on every project, multiple projects, be spending more than I'm earning. That's just a 101 of business, really. But it's surprising how many architects forget that's 101 for business. But is there some management in amongst all of that? Yes, there is. And part of my role is to coach my project leaders, to let them know that, that first of all, they need to recognise that that's the 101 of business. Once they've recognised that, the second thing is to say, right, where are we? Are we in trouble or are we not in trouble in relation to the resources that are required to deliver the project or not? If we are in trouble, what's our options? What do we need to then do to actually resolve or fix those problems? And then the next question after that is some decisions that we need to make. So, for example, are we prepared to take the loss on the project? And there might be a whole lot of reasons why we aren't. It might be because it's our fault. It might be because we're building a relationship with the client. We feel that investment is worthwhile. It might be that we end up with a decision-making process of the thing to say, well, you know what, I know you have an expectation that we're going to do X, Y, and Z. You're not paying for that. Sorry, we're not going to do it. All right, well, then you're going to be fired. Fine. Then you make that decision and you say, okay, there's a client that I've decided to burn. Because it's very hard to get back once you make those sorts of decisions. So it's a difficult process to go through and to think about. But you do. You have to make those decisions every day in relation to whether or not the client's worth the client to keep, or whether you let them go and you say, look, why don't you go and find somebody else? We're not a really good match. And that's okay. And as long as you can keep that as friendly as possible, then it should be okay.
And recognise that as well.
Sorry?
And recognise that there isn't that potential to keep going forward and kind of cut that.
And that's exactly right. Those are the decisions you've got to make. I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with one of my project leaders yesterday about a project whereby we have probably made a few mistakes along the way. None of them particularly serious other than program-wise, so we're a bit behind. And the fact that I now have a problem in that there's so many resources working on the project but weren't working very efficiently or productively, that they're doing the wrong things. I now have a loss on the project. So my project leader is now concerned about feeing the work, invoicing the work, up to the point where I needed an invoice for work to cover the costs on the basis that she hasn't enough money for the rest of the project to deliver it. And my view was, well, that's an issue we've got to continue to work on all the way through the process. But if I can legitimately invoice $1 today, that's way better for me than putting it off to invoice it tomorrow if we've legitimately done the work. Because otherwise then I'm actually borrowing from the bank to pay for you to do the work where I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to get it from the client. It creates a problem for me later on, and let me try and solve it later on. Let us work through the process of eventually solving that problem. Now, we might never get to a point where we solve the problem. It might end up being a loss-making project. I might actually have to borrow from the bank to actually pay it. Or I might be able to use some of the profits that I'm generating on other projects to pay for it. But the point being, though, that there's absolutely no point in delaying any ability that I've got to get the money today. Because if I get the money today from the client, I can put it in the bank and earn interest on it, which will help offset the losses anyway. So those are the sorts of, and does all that make sense? Yeah. So those are the sorts of conversations I'm trying to have with my guys to get them to understand basic business. That's just basic business. We can't keep working on these projects unless there's income coming in because I can't afford to pay for your salary. That's just the issue. So we need to together work through how to make all of those things work. And we should be able to. We've just got to think about it. But just do. Do you know what I mean? There's a time to do, but there are other times to sort of go, oh, hang on. How should we do so that we're actually getting an outcome for everyone, including the client? Because obviously at the end of the day, they're the ones that are most important. We've got to deliver what it is that we promised them we'd deliver, because what we want is that client to come back to us again.